Yo, Basic Brian back. Gonna go with C.S. Lewis's Miracles, Chapter 4, Nature and Supernature. Miracles. Here we go. Got a little drinky. Actually caffeinated, so the beer is going to kind of bring it down a little bit from over caffeination. So mixing up a little, and gonna read some quotes and notes from this chapter. Seems pretty similar to a chapter before, Naturalists and the Supernaturalists. And acts of reasoning are not interlocked with the total interlocking system of nature. Knowledge of a thing is not of the thing's parts, not of the machine parts. So that's a different thing than the parts itself. And we get some distinctions between capital R reason and capital N nature. Between reason and mass of non-rational events, whether physical or psychological. And there's a relationship between the reason and natural on a frontier, and there's traffic, but it's one-way traffic from reason to nature. We can succeed in modifying nature, more physical than psychological. Still mulling over that point. Nature is powerless to produce rational thought. Train of thought loses credentials as soon as its wholly result of non-rational causes. And it bears witness to colonization of nature by reason. Some things are like gardens that we upkeep and not let outgrow themselves. Buildings that we create, kind of made by reason, and haircuts even, and also books, the thoughts that are organized. Those would not be done by nature by itself, but aided by the rational and reason. Attention results from habits which reason had imposed on the natural ramblings of consciousness. Nature can suspend reason and consciousness as well. Nature, not a different reasoning or form of reasoning. It's nature itself, it's the matter, and there's an unsymmetrical relationship, reason being above nature versus a symmetrical relationship. And an unsymmetrical relationship would be a father and a son, and an example of a symmetrical relationship is a brother to brother, kind of on the same level. So reason has that kind of value over nature, and nature is pockmarked by reason. Nature is pockmarked by something different than itself. The idea of nature being enclosed is a human desire for tidiness and harmony, and often it's off-putting to modern sensibilities in certain ways. And C.S. Lewis has a quote from Bacon, the scientist, maybe archaeologist, I'm not sure exactly what his background is, but a scientific leaning, very early science pioneer. Human understanding of its nature is prone to suppose existence of more order and regularity in the world than it finds, actually. So, and this is kind of a desire of the Newtonian atomism, was more expected than quantum physics, which is a more difficult random forming of the atoms and the small particles. And rational thought is not part of nature, saying that again. And within each man, there is an area of activity which is independent of nature, her, he calls it. and he kind of refers to God as him. So that is part of a pattern that occurs in this work. Also, the capitalization of reason and nature as proper nouns or specific. And there's this eternal self-existent being, rational being, the B capitalized in being, which is God, and which is what Lewis is arguing for. And he gives the example of the train of thought of God and reason in man as accompanied by Immanuel Kant's the I think, in quotes, capital I. So that's God kind of governing the divine in man. Human thought is not God's, but it is also God kindled. I guess the ability to think is a God given thing, but it's sometimes human thoughts are wrong, or in a lot of ways, so many ways that common sense is not common. But so Lewis explains this as being God kindled, as we're not like puppets, just like a wire through electricity that God automatically operates and controls all the time. So it's God kindled, but we have some independent will. His rationality is the little telltale rift in nature, which shows there is something beyond or behind her. Talking about nature there. And then he talks about the emergent God, the pantheist God in naturalism versus the transcendental God. And he talks about the dualist view of God, that God and nature can be self-existence on their own. God didn't create nature, and they coexist and have no relation. But on the contrary, Lewis wants to argue that God created nature, but some people view it this way, that they're both there, but they're not necessarily, God doesn't necessarily above nature. And reason strengthens and saves my whole system psychologically and physically, but reason kind of not reason, but nature doesn't have that kind of availability herself. It doesn't produce thoughts or reasons. Reason enters more like a beam of light which illuminates, or a principle of organization which unifies and develops from God, not an enemy invasion, but more like the arrival of a king amongst his own subjects. So God created nature again, and some arguments for the creator are, as humans, we can only recombine elements borrowed from the universe and from the creator. What we imagine only exists for our own consciousness. We can use words to convey and induce ideas to others, but it's only roughly similar. It's not a real creation, something new. So God created these basic elements, senses, time and space, and matter. God is not subordinate to nature. Nature doesn't create thoughts. It can't be proved rigorously, but seems overwhelmingly probable. And if you read Genesis, it's a form of a folktale, a Hebrew folktale, that isn't exactly scientifically an explanation, but it's a folktale nonetheless, and true in certain ways. And that is how I will end this chapter. Thank you for watching. Cheers, everybody.